British Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson is visiting a refugee camp near Gaziantep as part of his two-day trip to Turkey. Johnson is also due to meet with members of the Syrian opposition. He's then expected to travel to Ankara for talks with the Turkish government, including President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. A potentially awkward meeting, considering Boris Johnson won a British magazine prize in May for writing a poem that mocked the president. Well, for the latest developments in Syria and on Johnson's visit, we can speak to Alican Ayanlar, who's in Nizip refugee camp near Turkey's southern border. Alican, the Foreign Secretary is expected to visit the camp where you are. What do we know what's in store?
I can say not only is expected, but he's been here now for about half an hour. He arrived, was greeted by the province's governor. The British Foreign Secretary then moved on to inspect and see the clinic on the premises. He had a casual conversation with one of the refugees that wasn't feeling too well. He asked him if he was okay and if he was happy and if he was and how long he'd been there. He then moved on to visit a classroom inside of the primary school on the premises here. Right now he's actually speaking to a couple of refugees families on the other side of this container camp where about 15,000 Syrian refugees are being hosted. Now, this is the first day of the British Foreign Secretary's visit, a three-day official visit to Turkey. And his visit to this camp is to show the UK's appreciation to Turkey's effort, that they've put in the last 5 years in terms of hosting these 2.7 million Syrian refugees. While in Gaziantep, Boris Johnson will also have a chance to meet with members of the Syrian opposition. All that we know right now is that they'll be discussing, quote, a range of issues. Now, Boris Johnson's visit comes on the back of that emergency session that was called at the United Nations Security Council on the request of the UK, France, and the US to evaluate the latest situation, specifically this intensified and new military campaign in Aleppo. Nothing substantial came out, but the UK's ambassador to the United Nations, Roycroft, did say that perhaps the US-Russia path on Russia was nearing the end of its life.
Alican, very briefly, we know that the refugees where you are in a much better situation than those across the border. Aid has started to come into Syria. What is the latest that you can tell us about the aid situation on the ground?
Well, 71 trucks belonging to an interagency aid convoy were able to deliver aid to about 60,000 people. That aid consisted of food rations as well as medical supplies and hygiene kits. But the situation in Aleppo is much worse. Not only are 250,000 people under siege, there is no running water for the 2 million residents of that city, but also Costello Road, just north of the city, a strategic road which was supposed to be used by the United Nations in terms of delivering that aid, is now under the control of the regime. Asha?
Okay, Alican Ayanlar live in Nizip in Turkey. Thank you.